Today we're diving into a really fascinating and honestly pretty complicated debate happening in a Texas community. Our guide for this is an incredibly detailed report from the Hills Observer. At its heart, this is a story about history, contracts, and a community trying to figure out what's fair when the rules stay the same but everything else has changed. Okay, to really get what's going on here, let me ask you something. How would you feel if you were forced to pay a monthly fee for, I don't know, a gym or a streaming service that you never ever use, just because of where your house is? Well, that's pretty much the exact situation facing every single resident in the Hills.
The Hills Observer's report just nails it with this quote. This right here pinpoints the central tension we're going to unpack. It's this total disconnect between being forced to pay for something while having absolutely no ownership or say in how it's run.
All right, so here's how we're going to break this all down, following the roadmap laid out in the Observer's excellent investigation. We'll start with the history, look at a huge structural change that happened, hear directly from the residents, figure out why change is so difficult, and then, finally, explore some possible ways forward.
So let's kick things off with the one rule at the center of this whole debate. Every single homeowner in the Hills is legally required, by a covenant in their property deeds, to pay monthly social membership dues to a private country club. Now, this isn't a new rule, it's been baked into the community from the start. But the questions about whether it's fair, well, that's a much more recent thing.
And this is where the story takes a really critical turn. You see, the way things are set up today is completely different from how it all began. We're about to see how something that was once a community asset, owned by the residents, turned into a corporate obligation.
See, back in the early days, the club was an equity model. Residents were basically shareholders, so the mandatory dues made a lot of sense, right? They were investing in something they all owned together. But then, financial troubles and even a bankruptcy changed everything. Today, the club is owned by a huge corporation backed by private equity. And this right here, this slide just lays out the whole problem perfectly. Everything that gave residents a stake in the club, their equity, their voting rights, any visibility into the finances, all of it gone. But the one thing that didn't change, that mandatory monthly payment and the Homeowners Association's legal duty to make sure you pay it.
So, with all that history, you have to wonder, how do the people who actually live there feel about all this today? The Observer's report did a fantastic job of breaking down the community into three main camps. First up, you have the residents who are strongly against the mandatory dues. For them, it all comes down to fairness. They feel like they're being forced to hand over money to a for-profit corporation, often for a service they don't even use, with dues that go up every year without any explanation. And that loss of their original ownership stake, that's a really big deal for them. Then, on the other side, you've got residents who fully support the system. Their argument is pretty straightforward. This was a condition that was clearly disclosed when they bought their homes. It's a legal contract, part of the deal. They believe the club adds value to the community and their property, and honestly, they think all this debate is just stirring up trouble. And, like in most things, there's a big group right in the middle. These are the folks who get it. They understand it's a legal requirement, but they also see the fairness issues. They aren't looking to burn the whole thing down, but they're really hoping for some kind of compromise. Okay, so this brings up the obvious question, right? If a whole bunch of people are unhappy, why don't they just, vote to change the rules? Well, as the Hills Observer report shows, the legal and structural hurdles make it way, way harder than it sounds. The problem is buried deep in a legal document called the Master Declaration, and changing it isn't like a normal election. It's not about getting a majority of the people who show up to vote. No, you have to get a yes from a majority of all homeowners in the entire community, whether they cast a ballot or not. And here's the number that makes it all so incredibly difficult. The report points out that you need more than 560 homes to vote yes. Think about that. Getting that many people to agree on anything is a massive challenge, especially when some are landlords living out of state or just aren't plugged into community issues. And that ridiculously high bar is exactly why previous attempts to change the rule have failed. The report points to things like low voter turnout, really short voting periods, and campaigns that use scary messaging about property values crashing to stop any change from happening. So, if a straightforward yes or no vote seems like a dead end, what's next? Well, the Hills Observer report doesn't just point out the problems, it also dives into some practical, more nuanced ideas for how the community could actually move forward. One of the biggest issues, something that comes up no matter who you talk to, is a total lack of transparency. Residents have no clue how the club is doing financially, how many members there are, or how their dues are calculated. It's this information vacuum that really fuels a lot of the mistrust.
So instead of this constant all-or-nothing fight, the report suggests some really concrete steps. Things like exploring different membership tiers for people who don't use the club, creating protections for seniors on fixed incomes, formally asking the club for financial data, and just making the voting process itself more fair and easier for everyone.
You know, when you step back, this whole situation in the Hills really boils down to a much bigger question, one that a lot of communities are dealing with. How do you adapt old rules, these legacy covenants, when the world they were written for doesn't exist anymore? It's a debate about fairness, contracts, and what it even means to be a community when the ground is completely shifted beneath your feet.